I know what you've been doing. I know you've been planning to steal from me, and I know you've been lying to me about your reasons.
My own grandchildren tried to steal my life savings. They thought they were dealing with some confused old man, but I was 3 steps ahead of them the entire time. I'm Vincent, I'm 73 years old, and this is the story of how I taught my ungrateful grandkids the most important lesson of their lives. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. You know, when you reach my age, you think you've seen everything. You think you understand people, especially your own family. But sometimes life throws you a curveball that knocks you flat on your back. This is one of those stories. It all started on a Tuesday morning in late September. The leaves were just beginning to turn, and I was enjoying my retirement in my little house in suburban Chicago. I'd worked as a machinist for 43 years at the same factory, saved every penny I could, lived modestly, and built up what I considered a decent nest egg for my golden years. About $200,000, give or take. Not a fortune by today's standards, but enough to keep me comfortable and maybe leave something for my family when I'm gone. My wife Margaret had passed away 3 years earlier, and since then, my 2 grandchildren, Jake and Sarah, had been spending more time with me. Jake was 25, fresh out of college with a business degree and a cocky attitude that reminded me way too much of his father, my son Robert. Sarah was 23, supposedly working on her master's degree, though I'd begun to wonder if she was actually attending classes or just collecting student loans. At first, I was thrilled to have them around more often. After Margaret died, the house felt so empty, so quiet. When Jake would stop by with takeout Chinese food, or when Sarah would offer to help me figure out my new smartphone, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely forgotten by the younger generation. I thought they genuinely cared about spending time with their old grandfather. How naive I was. That Tuesday morning, I was supposed to be taking my usual afternoon nap upstairs. I developed this routine since retirement. Morning coffee and newspaper, lunch around noon, then a solid 2-hour nap before dinner. Jake had stopped by around 1 o'clock, said he wanted to use my computer to print out some job applications. I'd given him the Wi-Fi password months ago, told him he was welcome to use anything in the house whenever he needed it. That's what grandfathers do, right? We help. So I headed upstairs for my nap, but about 20 minutes later, I realized I'd forgotten to take my blood pressure medication. As I quietly made my way down the stairs to get my pills from the kitchen counter, I heard Jake's voice coming from the living room. He was on the phone, and something in his tone made me stop and listen. "Yeah, Grandpa's getting pretty confused lately," Jake was saying, his voice low but not quite a whisper. "He won't even notice if we move some money around. The old man's got like 200 grand just sitting in his savings account doing nothing." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I gripped the banister tighter, my knuckles going white as I processed what I was hearing. Jake continued. "Sarah's already got access to his computer. She helped him set up online banking last month. We just need to wait for the right moment when he's really out of it, you know. Maybe we can convince him he's losing his memory, that he asked us to help manage his finances." My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid he might hear it. Sarah, my sweet granddaughter Sarah, who'd spent an entire afternoon patiently teaching me how to check my bank balance online, who'd insisted on writing down all my passwords just in case I forgot them. She'd been so helpful, so caring, or so I thought. "The beauty of it," Jake went on, "is that he trusts us completely. He'd never suspect his own grandchildren of ripping him off. And honestly, what's he gonna do with all that money anyway? Buy another 20 years of life. At least we can put it to good use." I heard him laugh, a cold sound that I'd never heard from him before. This wasn't the Jake who used to sit on my lap while I read him stories, who used to help me in the garage when he was a kid. This was a stranger wearing my grandson's face. How much are we talking about taking? Jake asked whoever was on the other end of the line. There was a pause. No, not all of it at once. That would be too obvious. We start small, maybe 5 grand here and there. Make it look like he's just spending more, you know. Maybe some expensive medical equipment, home improvements, stuff an old guy might actually buy. Then we gradually increase the amounts. I had to sit down on the steps. The betrayal was overwhelming. These weren't strangers trying to scam me over the phone. These were my own flesh and blood, my grandchildren, plotting to systematically drain my life savings. Money that I'd earned through decades of hard work, getting up at 5 in the morning, working double shifts, skipping vacations so I could save for the future. Sarah thinks we should wait until after Christmas, Jake continued. She says he always gets more sentimental around the holidays, more trusting. Plus, he usually gives us both pretty generous Christmas gifts anyway, so he'll be used to moving money around that time of year. Christmas. They were planning to rob me at Christmas, the one time of year when I splurged on my family, when I got genuine joy from being generous with the people I loved most. The irony was sickening. Look, I gotta go, Jake said. The old man's probably gonna wake up from his nap soon. But yeah, let's meet tomorrow night to go over the details. And remember, not a word to anyone else. This stays between the 3 of us. 3 of us. So there was someone else involved, someone else who knew about their plan to steal from me. I waited until I heard Jake's footsteps heading toward the front door, then I crept back upstairs as quietly as I could. From my bedroom window, I watched him get into his beat-up Honda Civic and drive away, probably feeling pretty pleased with himself. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours, trying to process what I'd just learned. Part of me wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, that maybe Jake was talking about something else entirely. But deep down, I knew exactly what I'd heard. My grandchildren were planning to steal from me, and they thought I was too old and confused to stop them. Well, they were about to learn that this old man wasn't nearly as helpless as they thought. I'd spent 4 decades in a factory where you had to be sharp, where one mistake could cost you a finger or worse. I'd managed a household budget through recessions, raised 3 kids, and built a life from nothing. I wasn't about to let 2 entitled kids destroy everything I'd worked for. That night, I called my old friend Frank Morrison. Frank had retired from the police force about 5 years earlier, after 30 years as a detective. We'd been buddies since high school, and I knew I could trust him completely. More importantly, Frank was one of the smartest people I'd ever known when it came to understanding how criminals think. "Frank," I said when he picked up the phone, "I need your help with something, and it's going to sound crazy." I told him everything I'd overheard, every detail of Jake's conversation. Frank listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always appreciated about him. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Vincent," he said finally, "I'm sorry this is happening to you, but I'm not surprised. We used to see this kind of thing all the time when I was on the force. Family members targeting elderly relatives, thinking they're easy marks. What do I do, Frank? Do I confront them, call the police?" "Well, technically they haven't stolen anything yet," Frank said. "They're just planning to, but here's what I'm thinking. What if we turn the tables on them? What if we give them exactly what they think they want, but on your terms?" Copilot said, "Part 2 asterisk, what do you mean turn the?" Part 2, what do you mean turn the tables? I asked Frank, though I could already hear the wheels turning in his head. Frank had always been the guy with the plan, even back in high school. "I mean, we set up a situation where they think they're succeeding, but you're actually controlling everything," Frank explained. "We make them reveal their true intentions, get them to show their hand completely, and then you decide how you want to handle it." The next morning, I started putting Frank's plan into motion. The first step was to act like the confused old man they apparently thought I was. When Sarah stopped by that Wednesday afternoon, ostensibly to check on me and bring me some groceries, I made sure to seem a little more scattered than usual. "Sarah, honey," I said, fumbling with my coffee cup, "I've been having the strangest dreams lately. Sometimes I wake up and I can't remember if I paid the electric bill or not. Yesterday I found my reading glasses in the refrigerator." Sarah's eyes lit up with what I now recognized wasn't concern but opportunity. "Oh, Grandpa, that's totally normal for someone your age," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Maybe you should think about getting some help managing your day-to-day stuff. You know, someone to help you keep track of your finances and bills." There it was. The setup, just like Jake had described on the phone. I played along perfectly. "You think so?" "I just worry about trusting strangers with my personal information. You hear so many stories about people taking advantage of seniors." "Well," Sarah said, sitting down next to me on the couch, "you wouldn't have to trust strangers. Jake and I could help you. We're family. We'd never let anything bad happen to you." The audacity was breathtaking. Here she was, looking me right in the eye and offering to protect me from exactly what she was planning to do herself. If I hadn't known better, I might have actually believed her concerned granddaughter act. "That's very sweet of you, dear," I said, patting her hand. "Let me think about it." That evening, Frank came over and we refined our strategy. "The key," he explained, "is to make them think they're in control while you gather evidence of their intentions. We need them to actually attempt the theft, or at least get close enough that their criminal intent is clear. But what if they actually manage to take the money?" I asked. "They won't," Frank assured me, "because we're going to set up a fake financial crisis that will make them think your money is suddenly at risk. When they try to save it by transferring it to accounts they control, we'll have them dead to rights." Over the next few days, I continued my confused grandfather act. I started leaving lights on, forgetting to lock the front door, and asking the same questions multiple times during conversations. Jake and Sarah began spending even more time at my house, always offering to help with various tasks. On Friday, Sarah offered to help me organize my important documents. "Just so everything's in one place, Grandpa," she said. "You know, in case of an emergency." I let her go through my filing cabinet, watching as she carefully photographed my bank statements, insurance policies, and investment account information with her phone. She thought she was being sneaky, but I caught her red-handed. The funny thing was, she was so focused on documenting my assets that she never noticed Frank sitting in his car across the street, photographing my documents. By the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after I'd overheard Jake's phone call, I was ready to spring the trap. That morning, I called Jake in a panic. "Jake, I need you to come over right away," I said, letting my voice shake a little. "Something terrible has happened with my bank account." Jake arrived within 20 minutes, which told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. Sarah showed up about 10 minutes later, claiming Jake had called her because he was worried about me. "What's wrong, Grandpa?" Sarah asked, putting her arm around my shoulders. "I got a call from the bank this morning," I said, wringing my hands dramatically. "They said there's been some kind of suspicious activity on my account. Something about hackers or identity theft. They've frozen all my assets pending an investigation." I watched their faces carefully. If they had been genuinely concerned about me, they would have looked worried about the stress this was causing me, or angry that someone was trying to take advantage of their grandfather. Instead, I saw something else entirely, panic about their own plans being disrupted. "Did they say how long the investigation would take?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "They don't know," I replied. "Could be weeks, could be months. In the meantime, I can't access any of my money. I can't even pay my bills." Sarah and Jake exchanged a quick glance. "Well, don't worry about that, Grandpa," Sarah said. "We can help you with whatever you need until this gets sorted out." "The thing is," I continued, "the bank suggested I might want to move my money to a different institution just to be safe. But I don't know how to do all that computer stuff, and I'm so confused by all these financial terms." This was the moment of truth. If my grandchildren genuinely cared about me, they would offer to help me find a reputable financial advisor, or suggest I contact a lawyer, or at least encourage me to wait until the bank's investigation was complete. Instead, Jake leaned forward eagerly. "You know what, Grandpa? I've been learning a lot about finance and investments in college. I could help you set up new accounts, maybe even find some better investment opportunities for your money." "That's such a generous offer," I said, "but I wouldn't want to burden you with something so complicated." "It's no burden at all," Sarah chimed in. "Actually, Jake and I have been talking, and we think it would be good for us to be more involved in helping you manage your finances anyway. You know, just to make sure everything's taken care of properly." There it was. They were making their move exactly as Frank had predicted they would. Over the next hour, they laid out their plan with remarkable detail. Jake would help me set up new bank accounts at a different institution, one where he could be listed as a co-signer, just in case something happened to me. Sarah would help me transfer my investment accounts to a brokerage firm that she'd researched and found to be much better than my current one. They even had paperwork ready, which told me they'd been planning this for much longer than just the week since I'd overheard Jake's phone call. "This is all so overwhelming," I said, playing my part perfectly. "Are you sure this is the right thing to do?" "Absolutely," Jake said, his voice full of false confidence. "Grandpa, you've worked too hard for your money to let some hackers steal it from you. We're just looking out for your best interests." The beautiful irony was that they were using my own money as justification for stealing my money. They genuinely seemed to believe they were doing me a favor by protecting me from thieves while planning to rob me themselves. "Well," I said finally, "if you really think this is best, I suppose I should trust your judgment. You are my family after all." The relief on their faces was palpable. Jake actually smiled, a genuine smile of satisfaction at how well their plan was working. Sarah squeezed my hand and told me how proud she was that I was being so proactive about protecting my assets. That afternoon, we drove to the bank where Jake wanted me to open my new accounts. It was a small regional bank about 30 miles away, which should have been my first red flag if I had actually been the confused old man they thought I was. Why would anyone suggest I move my money to a bank that was less convenient for me to access? At the bank, Jake did most of the talking. He explained to the banker that his grandfather needed to open new accounts due to security concerns with his previous bank, and that he would need to be listed as a co-signer due to his grandfather's increasing memory issues. I watched the banker's face as Jake spoke. The guy looked skeptical, which told me that this probably wasn't the first time someone had come in with a similar story. Banks see financial elder abuse all the time, and they're trained to recognize the warning signs. "Mr. Thompson," the banker said to me directly, "are you comfortable with this arrangement? Do you understand what it means to have your grandson as a co-signer on your accounts?" This was another moment where Jake and Sarah could have shown their true colors. If they were genuinely trying to help me, they would have encouraged me to ask questions, to make sure I understood everything fully. Instead, Jake jumped in immediately. "Like I explained, my grandfather has been having some memory issues lately," he said. "Sometimes he gets confused about financial stuff. That's why I need to be able to help him manage his accounts." The banker looked at me again. "Mr. Thompson, is that accurate? Are you having memory problems?" I could feel Jake and Sarah tensing up beside me. This was the critical moment. If I told the truth, their plan would fall apart immediately. I continued playing along, I would be giving them exactly what they wanted. Well, I said slowly, I do get confused sometimes. These young people understand computers and banking much better than I do. I just want to make sure my money is safe. The banker nodded, but I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. I'll need to see identification from both of you, and Mr. Thompson, I'll need you to sign some forms indicating that you're voluntarily adding your grandson as a co-signer. As we went through the paperwork, I made sure to ask plenty of questions and seemed generally overwhelmed by the process. Jake kept answering for me, which only made the banker look more suspicious. Finally, we had the new account set up. Jake would have full access to both my checking and savings accounts, able to make transfers and withdrawals without my signature. In other words, he could legally steal every penny I had, and there would be nothing I could do about it. Now, Jake said as we left the bank, we need to transfer your money from the old accounts to these new ones. We should do that as soon as possible before those hackers can do any more damage. How do we do that? I asked. Well, we'll need your online banking information for your current accounts, Sarah said. But don't worry, I'll handle all the computer stuff. You won't have to worry about any of it. Copilot said, Part 3, asterisk that night I called Frank too. Part 3. That night, I called Frank to update him on the day's events. They're moving faster than I expected, I told him. Jake now has legal access to the new accounts, and they want to transfer all my money tomorrow. Perfect, Frank said. That means we're about to catch them in the act. Are you ready for the final phase? The final phase of our plan was the most crucial part. Instead of giving them access to my real bank accounts, Frank had helped me set up fake online banking pages that looked identical to my real bank's website. With his connections from his police days, Frank knew a computer expert who specialized in financial fraud cases. This guy had created a completely convincing fake banking portal that showed my accounts with all the right balances, but any transfer attempts would actually go to monitored accounts that Frank controlled. Remember, Frank warned me, once they try to move the money, we'll have them on attempted theft. But you need to let them actually make the attempt, or a good lawyer might argue they were just planning and never intended to follow through. The next morning, Sarah arrived at my house bright and early, laptop bag in hand. Ready to get your money moved to safety, Grandpa? She asked with that same fake sweet voice she'd been using all week. Jake showed up about an hour later with coffee and donuts, playing the part of the caring grandson perfectly. All right, Grandpa, he said. Sarah's going to handle the computer work, and I'll walk you through each step so you understand what's happening. We sat down at my kitchen table, and Sarah opened her laptop. Okay, I need your login information for your current bank accounts, she said, pen poised over a notepad. I gave her the fake login credentials that Frank's computer expert had provided. She typed them in, and the fake banking website loaded perfectly. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw the account balances displayed on the screen. The fake site showed exactly what my real accounts contained, down to the penny. Wow, Grandpa, Jake said, leaning over to look at the screen. You really have been saving for a long time. What he didn't say, but what I could see in his expression, was that he was mentally calculating how much money he was about to steal from me. The fake website looked so authentic that even I was impressed by the computer expert's work. Now, Sarah said, we're going to transfer your money in stages. We don't want to move everything at once because that might trigger security alerts. This was interesting. They were actually being cautious about how they stole from me, worried about getting caught by the bank's fraud detection systems. It showed that they'd put real thought and planning into this crime. First, let's move $50,000 from your main savings account to your new account, Jake suggested. That's a nice round number that won't look suspicious. Sarah began typing, entering the routing and account numbers for the new bank account that Jake had set up. I watched her work, marveling at how comfortable she seemed with stealing from her own grandfather. This wasn't nervous criminal behavior, she was calm, methodical, professional. There, she said, clicking a button. Transfer initiated. It should go through within the next hour or two. On the fake website, it showed that the transfer was processing exactly as Frank's expert had programmed it to do. In reality, the money was going to a secure account that Frank monitored, where it would be held as evidence. "How do you feel, Grandpa?" Jake asked. "Pretty good, knowing your money is going to be safe from those hackers." "I feel relieved," I lied. "You kids are so smart about these things. I never would have known what to do without you." Over the next 2 hours, Sarah made 3 more transfers. Another 50,000, then 75,000, then the remaining balance from my main savings account. Each time, she explained that she was being strategic about the amounts to avoid triggering fraud alerts. What she was actually doing was systematically stealing every penny of my life savings while sitting at my own kitchen table. Jake kept up a steady stream of reassuring chatter throughout the process. "You know, Grandpa, this is probably the smartest financial move you've made in years," he said. "That old bank wasn't even paying you decent interest. With the new accounts, your money will actually grow." The audacity was breathtaking. Not only were they stealing from me, but they were convincing themselves that they were doing me a favor. They had rationalized their theft so completely that they genuinely seemed to believe their own lies. "What about my investment accounts?" I asked. "Should we move those too?" Sarah and Jake exchanged another one of their meaningful glances. "Well," Sarah said carefully, "investment accounts are a little more complicated. There might be penalties for moving them too quickly." What she really meant was that investment accounts have more oversight and would be harder to steal from without getting caught. But Jake had a different idea. "Actually," he said, "I've been reading about some really good investment opportunities lately. Instead of just moving your investment money to a new account at the same company, what if we found you some better investments?" "What kind of investments?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew where this was going. "Well, there's this startup company that a friend of mine is involved with," Jake said. "They're developing some kind of new technology and they're looking for investors. The returns could be incredible." A startup investment scam, of course. Not only did they want to steal my liquid savings, but they wanted to trick me into handing over my investment portfolio for some fictional company that probably existed only in Jake's imagination. "It sounds risky," I said. "I've always been pretty conservative with my investments." "Grandpa, that's exactly the problem," Jake said, his voice taking on a slightly condescending tone. "Conservative investments are fine when you're young and have time to build wealth slowly. But at your age, you need investments that can really grow quickly." The irony was incredible. My own grandson was using my age as a reason I should make risky investments, when conventional wisdom says exactly the opposite. At 73, I should be moving money into safer investments, not gambling on startups. "I don't know," I said. "It just seems like a lot of changes all at once." "Look," Sarah said, "we don't have to decide about the investments today. Let's just focus on getting your regular savings moved to safety first. We can talk about investment opportunities later." But Jake was getting impatient. I could see it in his body language, the way he kept checking his phone, the way he drummed his fingers on the table. "Actually, Sarah, I think we should move quickly on the investment thing," he said. "My friend said this opportunity might not be available much longer." This was the moment I realized that Jake and Sarah weren't just planning to steal my money. They were planning to steal it and then lose it in some stupid get-rich-quick scheme. They weren't just thieves. They were incompetent thieves who would probably blow my life savings on whatever scam someone had sold to Jake. "Tell me more about this investment," I said. "What exactly does this company do?" Jake's explanation was vague and full of buzzwords. The company was supposedly developing revolutionary blockchain technology that would disrupt multiple industries. When I asked for specifics, he got defensive. "Grandpa, I know it's hard to understand this stuff when you're not familiar with modern technology," he said, "but you have to trust that I've done my research." There it was again, using my age to dismiss my legitimate questions. In Jake's mind, being old automatically meant being stupid and gullible. "How much money would I need to invest?" I asked. "Well, the minimum investment is $100,000, Jake said. "But honestly, to really see significant returns, you want to invest at least $200,000. $200,000, almost exactly the amount of my total savings. What a coincidence." "That's a lot of money, Jake," I said. "That's almost everything I have." "I know it seems like a lot," Sarah said, "but think about it this way. If the investment pays off the way Jake thinks it will, you could double or even triple your money within a year." The promise of unrealistic returns. Another classic element of investment fraud. Anyone with basic financial knowledge knows that legitimate investments that can double your money in a year are extremely rare and extremely risky. But they were counting on me being too old and confused to understand that. "I suppose if you really think it's a good idea," I said slowly. "You are both much smarter about these things than I am." "We'll take care of everything," Jake assured me. "You won't have to worry about any of the details." That afternoon, Sarah made 2 more large transfers from my investment accounts, moving the money to the new checking account that Jake controlled. According to the fake banking website, I now had almost nothing left in my original accounts. Every penny of my life savings was sitting in accounts that my grandson could access without my permission. "There," Sarah said, closing her laptop with satisfaction. "Your money is completely secure now. Those hackers won't be able to touch it. What happens next?" I asked. "Well," Jake said, "I'm going to contact my friend about the investment opportunity. With the amount of money you have available, you'd qualify for their premium investor package. And in the meantime," Sarah added, "your money will be earning much better interest in these new accounts." It was fascinating to watch them lie so smoothly. They had an answer for everything, a justification for every step of their theft. They had convinced themselves so completely that they were helping me that I almost wondered if they genuinely believed it. That evening, after they left, I called Frank to confirm that all the transfers had been captured by his monitoring system. "We got everything," he told me. "Every transaction, every conversation you recorded on your phone, every document they had you sign. We have enough evidence to put them away for a long time." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now," Frank said, "you decide how you want to handle this. We can call the police right now and have them arrested for financial elder abuse and attempted theft. Or, if you want to teach them a lesson first, we can let them think they've succeeded for a few more days while we gather even more evidence." I thought about it for a long time that night. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately and watch my ungrateful grandchildren get what they deserved. But another part of me, the grandfather who still remembered teaching them to ride bicycles and helping them with homework, wanted to give them one more chance to do the right thing. "Let's wait," I told Frank the next morning. "I want to see how far they're willing to go with this." Copilot said, Part 4, asterisk the next 3 days were a... Part 4. The next 3 days were a masterclass in watching criminals dig their own graves. Jake called me every morning to check on how I was feeling about the financial changes, which was really his way of making sure I wasn't getting suspicious. Sarah stopped by each afternoon with groceries or some other excuse, always asking if I needed help with anything, always offering to check on my accounts to make sure everything was going smoothly. On Thursday morning, Jake showed up with a folder full of papers. "Great news, Grandpa," he said, barely able to contain his excitement. My friend got back to me about the investment opportunity, and he's willing to fast-track your application. The paperwork he showed me was impressive, professional-looking documents with official seals, detailed financial projections, even testimonials from supposedly satisfied investors. If I had actually been the confused old man they thought I was, I might have been convinced. But having spent 40 years in manufacturing, I knew how to spot shoddy workmanship when I saw it. The documents were full of spelling errors, inconsistent formatting, and financial projections that made no mathematical sense. "This looks very official," I said, examining the papers carefully. "What exactly would I be investing in?" Jake launched into another vague explanation about blockchain technology and cryptocurrency mining, throwing around technical terms that he clearly didn't understand himself. When I asked specific questions about the company's business model, he got frustrated. "Grandpa, you're overthinking this," he said. "Sometimes you just have to trust the experts. I wouldn't steer you wrong, you're my grandfather." The manipulation was breathtaking. He was using our family relationship to pressure me into making a financial decision that would benefit him at my expense. This wasn't just theft anymore, this was emotional abuse. How soon would I need to make this investment? I asked. "Well, that's the thing," Jake said. "This is a limited time opportunity. My friend can only hold your spot until Monday. After that, the investment opens up to other people and you might lose your chance." Artificial urgency, another classic fraud tactic. Create pressure to make a quick decision so the victim doesn't have time to think clearly or ask for outside advice. "Monday is only 4 days away," I said. "That doesn't give me much time to think about it." "Grandpa, what's to think about?" Sarah chimed in. She had arrived while Jake was showing me the paperwork, and now they were both pressuring me together. "You've already moved your money to safety. This is just the next logical step to make that money grow." That afternoon, I called my son Robert, Jake, and Sarah's father. I hadn't spoken to him much since Margaret died, partly because he lived across the country in California, and partly because our relationship had been strained for years. Robert had always been the kind of person who felt entitled to things he hadn't earned, and I suspected that attitude had rubbed off on his children. "Robert," I said when he answered the phone, "I need to ask you something and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Sure, Dad, what's going on? Have Jake and Sarah talked to you recently about my finances, about me having memory problems or needing help managing my money?" There was a long pause, too long. "Why do you ask?" Robert said finally, "Because your children are trying to steal from me and I want to know if you're involved." Another pause. "Dad, I think you might be confused. Jake mentioned that you've been having some trouble with remembering things lately, and that you asked them to help you with some banking issues." So Robert was involved. Maybe not directly, but he at least knew what his children were planning and had chosen to look the other way. "Robert," I said, my voice getting harder, "I am not confused. I am not having memory problems. Your children have systematically manipulated me, gained access to my accounts, and stolen my life savings. And apparently you know about it." "Dad, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure you're thinking clearly? Maybe you should see a doctor, get checked out for dementia or something." The betrayal was complete. Not only were my grandchildren stealing from me, but my own son was participating in the gaslighting, trying to convince me that I was mentally incompetent rather than acknowledging that his children were criminals. "I'm thinking perfectly clearly, Robert. Clear enough to know that I raised a son who would rather believe his children are thieves than admit he failed as a father." I hung up before he could respond. That evening, Frank came over to review our evidence one more time. We had recordings of Jake and Sarah discussing their plans, photographs of them accessing my accounts, bank records showing the fraudulent transfers, and now documentation of their investment scam. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of financial elder abuse I've ever seen. Frank told me. Any prosecutor would love to have evidence this solid. What kind of sentences are we talking about? I asked. Financial elder abuse is a felony in most states. With the amount of money involved and the premeditation we can prove, Jake and Sarah could be looking at 5 to 10 years each. Maybe more if we can prove this was part of a larger scam operation. Friday morning, Jake called to tell me he had arranged a meeting with his investment advisor for Saturday afternoon. He's driving up from the city specifically to meet with you, Grandpa, Jake said. This is a really big deal. Most people don't get this kind of personal attention from someone at his level. What should I bring to the meeting? I asked. Just yourself and a positive attitude, Jake said. I'll handle all the paperwork and technical stuff. All you need to do is sign where I tell you to sign. Saturday arrived, and with it came one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Jake's investment advisor turned out to be a guy named Tommy who looked like he was barely out of high school. He showed up at my house in a rusty pickup truck, wearing a wrinkled suit that was too big for him and carrying a briefcase that looked like it came from a thrift store. Mr. Thompson, Tommy said, shaking my hand with the overly firm grip of someone trying too hard to seem professional. It's an honor to meet you. Jake has told me so much about you. For the next hour, Tommy gave me the most unconvincing sales pitch I'd ever heard. He claimed to represent a company called Future Tech Solutions that was developing revolutionary cryptocurrency mining technology. According to Tommy, my investment would be used to purchase specialized computer equipment that would generate massive profits through automated trading algorithms. It was complete nonsense, the kind of technological word salad that might impress someone who didn't understand computers or finance. But what really convinced me that this was a scam was Tommy himself. Real investment advisors don't show up at clients' houses in beat-up trucks. They work out of offices, they're licensed and regulated, and they never, ever promise guaranteed returns of 300% in 6 months. So, Mr. Thompson, Tommy said, pulling out a contract, are you ready to secure your financial future? The contract was even more obviously fraudulent than the earlier paperwork Jake had shown me. It was full of legal-sounding language that actually meant nothing, and it basically said that I would give them $200,000 in exchange for their promise to maybe give me some money back at some unspecified future date. This is a lot to process, I said. Could I have a few minutes to think about it? Jake immediately jumped in. Grandpa, Tommy drove all the way up here specifically for this meeting. This opportunity isn't going to wait forever. That's right, Mr. Thompson, Tommy added. I've got other investors interested in this deal. If you don't commit today, I'll have to offer your spot to someone else. More pressure tactics. They wanted me to sign immediately without having time to think or ask questions or consult with anyone else. It was textbook fraud behavior. Well, I said, reaching for the pen Tommy offered me, I suppose if Jake thinks this is a good idea, I should trust his judgment. I was about to sign the contract when my phone rang. It was Frank, calling at exactly the time we had arranged. Excuse me, I told Tommy and Jake. I should take this call. Grandpa can't wait. Jake said, clearly frustrated that their moment of triumph was being interrupted. It might be important, I said, answering the phone. Hello. Vincent, Frank said loudly enough that everyone in the room could hear him. I've got some bad news. That bank you moved your money to, they've been shut down by federal regulators. Something about money laundering and fraud. All their accounts have been frozen pending investigation. The color drained from Jake's face. Tommy looked confused, clearly not understanding what was happening. Sarah, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly stood up. What does that mean? Jake asked, his voice shaky. It means, I said, still holding the phone to my ear while Frank continued his performance, that all the money we transferred there might be gone. That's impossible, Jake said. We researched that bank. They had good ratings, good reviews online. Sometimes these things happen very suddenly, I said. Frank, what should I do? You need to get down to the bank immediately, Frank said. Bring all your paperwork, all your account information. And Vincent, don't trust anyone else with your financial information until this gets sorted out. These bank failures sometimes involve inside jobs, people who knew which accounts to target. I hung up the phone and looked at the three people sitting in my living room. Tommy was already packing up his briefcase, clearly wanting to get out before he got caught up in whatever financial disaster was apparently unfolding. Jake was staring at his phone, probably trying to look up news about the bank closure that Frank had invented. Sarah was doing quick calculations on a piece of paper, probably trying to figure out how much money they thought they were about to lose. I'm sorry, Tommy, I said, but I'm going to have to postpone this investment decision. I need to deal with this banking crisis first. Of course, Mr. Thompson, Tommy said, already heading for the door. Just call me when you get everything sorted out. After Tommy left, Jake and Sarah tried to convince me that Frank must be mistaken, that there was probably just some kind of computer glitch with the bank's systems. But I could see the panic in their eyes. They weren't worried about my money, they were worried about getting caught. Maybe we should go to the bank and see what's really going on, Sarah suggested. Good idea, I said. But first, I want to call my lawyer. If there's really been some kind of fraud involving that bank, I want to make sure I'm protected. That was when Jake finally broke. Grandpa, wait, he said. Before you call any lawyers or go to the bank, there's something Sarah and I need to tell you. Here it comes, I thought, the confession. What is it? I asked. Jake and Sarah looked at each other, having some kind of silent conversation. Finally, Sarah spoke up. We haven't been completely honest with you about why we wanted to help you move your money. What do you mean? We weren't just worried about hackers, Jake said. We were also worried about our dad. Your father. What does Robert have to do with this? Dad's been having financial problems, Sarah explained. His business is failing, and he owes a lot of money to some bad people. We were afraid he might try to borrow money from you or even try to take it without asking. This was interesting. They were trying to reframe their theft as protection, claiming they had stolen my money to prevent someone else from stealing it. It was a new twist on their manipulation strategy. So you moved my money to accounts that Robert couldn't access? I asked. Exactly, Jake said, looking relieved that I seemed to be buying their new story. We were just trying to protect you. And the investment opportunity. Well, Sarah said, we figured as long as your money was safe from Dad, we might as well try to make it grow for you. They were still lying, still manipulating, still trying to find a way to justify what they had done. Even caught in the middle of their own scam, they couldn't bring themselves to tell the truth. That's very thoughtful of you, I said. But if Robert is really in that much trouble, maybe I should help him directly instead of hiding my money from him. No, Jake said quickly. Grandpa, you don't understand. The people he owes money to, they're dangerous. If they knew you had money, they might come after you too. More lies, more manipulation. They were making up an entire fictional scenario to justify their theft. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had admitted that they had deliberately deceived me about their reasons for moving my money. That admission, combined with all the other evidence we had gathered, was more than enough to prove criminal intent. Well, I said, I suppose we should go to the bank and see how bad this situation really is. We drove to the bank in my car, with Jake and Sarah both trying to prepare me for what we might find. They were still acting like concerned grandchildren, still pretending that they were on my side. At the bank, we asked to speak with the manager about the supposed federal investigation. The manager, who was expecting us thanks to Frank's advance call, played his part perfectly. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, he said, but I can't discuss the details of an ongoing federal investigation. What I can tell you is that all accounts are currently frozen, and it may be several weeks before we know when normal banking operations can resume. Jake tried to ask about getting access to his grandfather's money for essential expenses, but the manager explained that no transactions could be processed until the investigation was complete. What should we do? I asked Jake, maintaining my confused grandfather act to the very end. I don't know, Grandpa, Jake said, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I think he was telling the truth. He genuinely didn't know what to do because his plan was falling apart and he didn't have a backup strategy. We drove home in silence. Jake and Sarah were probably trying to figure out how to salvage their scheme, while I was mentally preparing for the confrontation I was about to have with them. Back at my house, I asked them to sit down at the kitchen table. Jake, Sarah, I said, there's something I need to tell you both. They looked at me expectantly, probably hoping I was about to suggest some new way to access my money. I know what you've been doing, I said simply. I know you've been planning to steal from me, and I know you've been lying to me about your reasons. The silence in the room was deafening. Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Sarah went completely pale. I heard your phone conversation a week and a half ago, Jake, I continued. I heard you telling someone that I was confused and wouldn't notice if you moved my money around. I heard you planning to steal from me at Christmas because you thought I'd be more trusting then. Grandpa, I can explain, Jake started. No, I said firmly. You can listen. I've been letting you think your plan was working because I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to see if you would come to your senses and do the right thing. Instead, you've spent the last week and a half systematically stealing from me while pretending to care about my welfare. We do care about you, Sarah said weakly. No, you don't, I replied. People who care about me don't lie to me, manipulate me, or steal from me. People who care about me don't try to convince me that I'm losing my memory when I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I pulled out my phone and showed them the recording app I'd been using to document their conversations. I have recordings of everything you've said, photographs of you accessing my accounts, and documentation of every fraudulent transfer you've made. The bank investigation, Jake started. There is no bank investigation, I said. My friend Frank helped me set up fake accounts to catch you in the act. Your Tommy isn't a real investment advisor. He's probably just some kid you found to help you with your scam. And all of my real money is still safely in my original accounts, where it's always been. The realization hit them like a freight train. They had been completely outmaneuvered by the confused old man they thought they were taking advantage of. Now, I said, you have exactly one choice to make. You can leave this house right now, never contact me again, and pray that I don't decide to press charges. Or you can try to justify what you've done, in which case I will call the police right now and have you both arrested for financial elder abuse and attempted theft. Jake tried one last manipulation. Grandpa, we're family. You can't do this to your own grandchildren. You stopped being my family the moment you decided to steal from me, I said. Family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't lie to each other. And family sure as hell doesn't try to steal a lifetime of savings from their own grandfather. They left without another word. I watched from my front window as they got into Jake's car and drove away, probably to call their father and try to figure out their next move. I never saw them again. A few days later, I got a call from Robert. He tried to convince me that his children had made a mistake, that they were young and stupid but not really bad people. I told him that if he wanted to maintain any kind of relationship with me, he would need to accept that his children were thieves who had gotten exactly what they deserved. I also told him that if any of them ever contacted me again, I would press charges immediately. 6 months later, Frank told me that Jake had been arrested in another state for running a similar scam on an elderly couple. Apparently, stealing from me had been practiced for a larger operation. Sarah, as far as I know, moved away and changed her name. Robert and I haven't spoken since that last phone call. People ask me if I regret how I handled the situation, if I wish I had tried harder to work things out with my family. The answer is no. I don't regret it for a second. My grandchildren showed me exactly who they really were, and I responded accordingly. Trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. They had every opportunity to do the right thing, to show genuine concern for my welfare, to treat me with the respect that 73 years of hard work and decent living had earned me. Instead, they chose to see me as a victim to be exploited. In the end, I taught them the most valuable lesson of their lives, that actions have consequences, and that being family doesn't give you the right to hurt the people who love you. I just wish it hadn't taken losing my grandchildren forever to teach them that lesson. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts about this story in the comments below. For more incredible true stories, check out the video on the left.